to everyone, particularly those who are marginalized and vulnerable. The challenge ahead of us is daunting. In LDCs, for example, only 30% of the population have access to internet. And then when it comes to women, it's only 30%. So our recent study and also our event today provides us with an important and a timely opportunity to reflect on these challenges, but also to learn about the many promising avenues through which the power of transformative digital innovation can be successfully leveraged and brought to scale to accelerate progress in the reduction of vulnerability and poverty in LDCs. At UNDP, we are fully committed to supporting LDCs with the development of inclusive innovation and the digital ecosystems that are responsible and responsive to the needs of people and can transform their lives with low cost and cost-effective and high-quality access to key public and private services. Today, we will hear many examples. I think one of them is our pioneering experience in Bangladesh. And excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, innovation and digitalization, and I would also say plus financing, have enormous potential to help leapfrog and fulfill our pledge to leave no one behind in LDCs. Together, we can ensure that innovation and digitalization empower everyone to participate in and benefit from development. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussions.
Thank you very much, Hao-Liang. Let me now pass on the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Khalifa Al-Kubari, Director General of the Qatar Fund for Development. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this side event that aims to discuss the potential of digitalization and innovation to address poverty and leave no one behind in the LDCs. As outlined by the UN Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, technology and cyberspace are a key priority to be wielded for the benefit of mankind in the context of the global digital cooperation framework. The scale, size, and geographic spread of the global challenges we are witnessing require all of us to work together in developing new solutions that can be enabled and advanced through science and technology. All SDG goals and their targets, whether in areas such as combating poverty, reducing inequality, abating climate change, promoting inclusive economic growth, or improving access to health and education, these are largely impacted by how far we are collectively advanced in science, digital technology, and innovation. The most recent example of COVID-19 outbreak has shown us, without any room for doubt, that the transformative power of science, technology, and innovation and developing effective vaccines so quickly, so efficiently saving millions of human lives, bringing an end to a nightmare that haunted us all. At an equivalent magnitude, the readiness, accessibility, and connectivity to technology brought to classrooms, to some, to homes at times of mandatory lockdowns, avoiding disruption in education for this young. The STI is our bid to turn the unthinkable to the inevitable in mitigating climate change and reversing global warming. Here, I would like to highlight that the Qatar Fund for Development's partnerships with the UNDP and the government of Germany our accelerator labs are given inputs and grounds for innovative solutions to flourish and grow. These locally driven, scalable, and viable technology startups ideas are mainly focused on achieving the SDGs to have so far reached 115 countries. But despite these advancements, work is still needed in harnessing the STI to its full potential. First, we must ensure that enabling the ecosystem available and accessible for the youth, especially in the LDCs. Creating the necessary supportive infrastructure, developing the right skills and capacities, and promoting investments in R&Ds can bridge the scientific and technological gap that exists between many countries. Second, facilitating access to finance and angel investment for entrepreneurs and MSMEs can catalyze innovative scientific and technological breakthroughs. The dividend of success in this area also has a bearing on strengthening local economies, creating value-added jobs, and abating inequalities based on income, gender, and age. Third, humanity must be put in the center of technology. In other words, the STI should serve us while we ensure that privacy, safety, and well-being of people are not subject for any form of risk and compromise, specifically in medical research and cyberspace. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, allow me to underline and stress that innovation, science, and technology may not be the answer for all of our problems. Government and the private sector, civil societies organization, among other stakeholders, must bear that STI advancement with enabling policy environment, and governance structure to the benefit of empowering all people. To this end, I wish to reiterate my gratitude to the organizers of this important event and hope that our collective intelligence will help guarantee new ideas effectively and timely for the future and the benefits of the mankind. Thank you.
Your Excellency,
thank you so much for this very enlightening speech on what technology innovation can make for inclusion, because there is no prosperity without inclusion. So I think it's a key message. The second one, of course, is that technology is not necessarily a panacea. You need to create enabling environments for technology innovation to make it work for inclusion. So our session today is organized around two segments. During the first segment, we will be looking at the way innovation and digital solutions in particular can help empower vulnerable groups, and in particular, the millions and millions of men and women operating, working, depending on the informal economy. And to reflect on this challenge, but also the opportunities, I'm privileged to have with us eminent speakers. To start with, we have Professor Erika Pranambula from the University of Johannesburg. She's professor in economics, and she's also heading a research unit on transformative innovation. Then we will follow our colleague Innocent Fred Ejulu from the UNDP Uganda, and the Accelerator Lab will tell us more on how technology and especially digital solutions can be leveraged to empower women and help them trade. And then we will have another perspective from Mr. Radhaka Hadikari, Executive Director, Executive Secretariat for the Enhanced Integrated Framework at WTO, to give us further perspective on how digital trade can be unleashed and activated also to empower women. So without delay, let me hand over to Erika. Erika, I'm going to challenge you with a first question. From your perspective in Africa, in particular, how do you think we can leverage digital technology and related opportunities for inclusive and sustainable growth, and in particular for helping informal economy actors to access the mainstream of the economy? Over to you, Erika.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Excellent, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. I would like to also thank the organizers, the Qatar Fund for Development and UNDP for inviting me to share my insights in this session. I would like to maybe address your question by presenting these two major dynamics of trends that I see crucial to bring together if we want to achieve inclusive digital economies in Africa. One is, of course, this main digital transformation that the continent has been experiencing, particularly for the past 15 years or so. We have seen digital technologies transforming pretty much every layer of African societies and economies. Some people refer to it as the potential for leapfrogging. Right? It's about advancing in a very rapid in a very rapid mode by adopting modern technologies, surpassing sometimes intermediate steps that other mature economies have done. And we have examples of that, looking at fixed line telephony and fintech and so on. So leapfrogging can happen, and the idea is that digital technologies and the digital transformation that the continent is going through can be an instrument for that. So we have that trend happening. On the other hand, we have a major phenomenon, which is the informal economy. The informal economy currently provides jobs for about 80%. 80% of the jobs in the continent are informal. The informal economy is often seen as something marginal that happens underground in the shadows. But for those that have experience with LDCs, we know that the informal economy in many countries is the economy. Is essentially the core and the center of the productive and consumption structures. This is where people find the jobs, this is where people find livelihoods. So it is the people's economy, it is the economy. And the informal economy is also bursting with creativity. Women and youth are also largely represented in it. And informality often operates in conditions of scarcity. And often means operating in conditions of scarcity often means that people come up with creative ideas and solutions to overcome everyday challenges. And in some cases, it's solutions that are emerged in the informal economy turn into innovations, into new ways of doing things that in some cases can drastically change the way things are done, and in some cases better address local needs as well. So many of them use digital technologies. Not all of them, but many of them also use digital technologies in this context of growing digitalization. And since the informal economies have been driven by these ideas of recycling, repurposing, reducing, more environmental friendly kind of innovations are likely to emerge from the informal economy. But there are some issues. One of them is that they often, innovators in the informal economy often remain invisible and accounted for and excluded from the larger innovation ecosystem. And all research shows that they have insufficient access to skills, technology, finance, and support in general. So giving visibility and support to the innovators in the informal economy is central to the development of inclusive digital technologies in Africa. There's also the digital divide. There's been a lot of discussion in this meeting about with less than 1/3 connected to the internet, and this digital divide is even worse for women. So my main message here, just to conclude, is that achieving inclusive digital economies in Africa requires bringing these two dynamics together. The massive innovative potential of the informal economy with the power of digital.
Thank you so much, Erika, for this very insightful perspective on how to empower informal economy actors, to join the mainstream of the economy. And thanks for noting that innovation, once again, is happening within the informal economy, because people have to deal with the challenges they are facing on a day-to-day basis, be it economic, social, or environmental challenges, and that there is much we can tap on. So I will challenge you with another question, but let me now turn to our colleague, Mr. Innocent Fréjus, with the first question, which might be echoing quite well what Erika just said. So what role do you see innovation play in system transformation in the economy, and especially in your country, in Uganda?
Okay, thank you very much. And it's a great pleasure to be here in Doha. I'm loving it here. I'll share the story from the perspective of what the UNDP is doing, specifically the role the Accelerator Lab is playing to actually position or embed innovation in the way we do our development support in the country, in Uganda. Now, when COVID hit us, it was a huge disruptor. In the Ugandan context, it was so brutal that when we locked down movement for the markets, for the communities, the informal sector suffered a lot. It really suffered a lot. And we are talking about 80% of the Ugandan economy, of which 90% are young people, and many derive their livelihoods from these small businesses. So we quickly thought about how we might engage to sort of find a solution for these businesses to be able to stay very much alive, because up to 45% of these businesses were facing collapse. So what we came in was to quickly pivot an e-commerce platform. This is Jumia, which is big in the country, big in a number of countries on the continent, and say, how can we go beyond the typical market segments you serve? Because Jumia essentially was serving the middle class, electronics, furniture, cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, etc. We said, is there a way we can bring the bottom of the pyramid, the informal sector, on board? How can they use this channel to get to the consumer? Because they were disconnected. So through that process, of course, we had reflections on the challenges we had to overcome. One, we are dealing with vendors who are generally illiterate. They also don't know how to use technology. They are not that tech savvy. Also, there was a huge challenge of, how do we facilitate them to be able to quickly, adapt to this technology. So what we did, we worked with the Jumia platform and said, what can we bring to solve this problem? So we introduced some technology. The private sector was not willing to invest in this technology. So smartphones in the market, we quickly identified the more tech-savvy youth and positioned them in these markets as for agents in the market to, sort of bridge that tech gap, bridge that knowledge gap. And it worked very well because we are able to onboard close to 4,000 market vendors. And these were able to continue, in business during this very challenging time, of COVID. We also able to do the training so that they were able to also make the transitions, get the technology into their hands. So basically, innovation becomes very important here because we are looking at how do you quickly make it possible for technology to be relevant for a very informal sector like the informal economy that we have in Uganda. So I have to say that it has been very successful. We are currently working on how to scale this technology through policy so that we can see systems change. We can see more incentives for the funds to be accessible by the informal sector. We can see more incentives for the data to be affordable, so the cost of internet to be more accessible for these vendors. We want to also see the big companies doing more to actually include this informal segment. So what we've been able to achieve here is just to identify a solution and try to work to test and adapt it to a real need, that was sparked by the COVID. So that's what we've done in the Ghanaian context.
Thank you, Mark, very much. I might get back to you actually with additional questions, but let me invite Ratnakar Adhikari for some perspectives on the work that is been taking place in Asia Pacific when it comes to digital trade, and what is the potential of this solution, so to speak, to empower women. Over to you.
Thank you, Natalie. And I would like to join other panelists in thanking UNDP and Qatar Fund for the development, for inviting me to this panel. Excellencies, fellow panelists and participants. So, what we just started back in 2019 when we realized the potential of e-commerce, particularly for women entrepreneurs who were already in the game, but then they were unable to take advantage of opportunities offered by e-commerce. A, because of significant digital divide. B, because of the skill set that they required for taking advantage of the opportunity did not simply exist, right? So therefore, we started this, and then we realized the potential of women entrepreneurs being able to utilize the opportunity because of the low cost of entry for women entrepreneurs to enter the business of e-commerce. And there was a possibility of expanding their outreach and then the global connection through e-commerce. And that was very, very important in the context of the small scale nature of their business and the fact that they would be in a position to reduce the cost of the intermediaries or middlemen and then directly connect to the consumers. So that was another. And the third potential that we realized was that women entrepreneurs would be able to maintain, I don't say work-life balance, life-work balance, while doing e-commerce business transaction. So we started this project in 2019 with a target of training 500 women entrepreneurs in South Asian LDCs. So, what happened was that COVID happened. So, and as a result of which, most of the training happened virtually. Later, we organized in-person training as well. And this project that we implemented together with UNSCAP in South Asia, as a result of COVID, actually COVID offered an opportunity. And as a result of this, by December 2022, we were able to train 2,032 women entrepreneurs in the region and 943 from the LDCs alone. These are Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Nepal. And the training was organized, provided not only on e-commerce, but also on digital marketing, because it was super important for women entrepreneurs to be able to navigate the digital marketing access in order to enhance their presence in the e-commerce platforms. Then we also set up what is known as We Sell Online, a training platform. This is not a selling platform, but it was a training platform that was created where 818 women entrepreneurs registered and 1,474 products were placed on display. And then there were inquiries, business inquiries, more than $200,000 were received during the period of the project. Project is now in the process of being wrapped up. But then one of the spillover benefit of this project, which we did not envisage at the beginning of the process, is that these women, when they were selling, showcasing their products in the platform, and also when they met in person, it actually naturally created an environment for B2B transactions. The women now from Bhutan are selling to women entrepreneurs in India. Women entrepreneurs from India are selling to Bangladesh. Nepal selling to Bangladesh. So that's the kind of opportunity that came up through the project that we implemented, and there's a lot of potential there. So I'll stop here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to go through a second round of questions because hopefully the other panelists would also reflect on what they've heard about the experience of the project. I have project in Asia Pacific, but also the excellent work done piloted actually by our colleagues in Uganda. But Erika, that's the key question. To make this work and at scale for the most vulnerable, what kind of support do you think is needed?
Thank you, and thanks for the very insightful inputs from the other panelists. I would say, I mean, I want to be short in the answer, so I will probably leave some areas of support that are also important out of my answer. But I'll start by highlighting that digital economy is infrastructure heavy. There are still many problems with unequal access to electricity and intermittent electricity supply, and these continue to pose very serious challenges to the realization of the digital economy in Africa. So that is one that is kind of an obvious and a place to start. And while it is the second one is that while it's very important to support individual entrepreneurs that are understanding the challenges, designing interventions that target the needs, it's also very important, even if not more important, to support, and I think the interventions from the previous panelists highlight how important it is to support the development of an ecosystem. So it's not only about targeting individual entrepreneurs, but having a broader view and thinking about systems. What does that mean? So that means supporting the development of an ecosystem means three things from my point of view. One is making foundational investments, as I said, in infrastructure, access to basic services, and generally addressing those digital divides in education, energy access, income. Lifting the base is one of the core ingredients to build inclusive ecosystems. This also implies ensuring that those that are currently invisible, such as those in the informal economy, and are seen as part and parcel. That's that first sort of foundational investment to build an ecosystem. Secondly, it means having these targeted interventions to those vulnerable groups. So interventions that target women, youth, informal actors are essential, and this requires a coordinated response, which often is seen sort of in silos. There's support in terms of gender, support in terms of youth, support in terms of entrepreneurship, but very rarely you see a coordinated response that cuts across and has the intention, the purpose, the direction to achieve this goal. And thirdly, and again, the previous panelists have highlighted this, in the process of building an ecosystem or taking a systems approach to how to support this. You need to help, one, build this constellation of actors that are currently engaging with this type of entrepreneurs. Accelerators, incubators, different organizations that provide training and skills development. All of those need to be developed. You need a constellation of those, but even more importantly, you need to connect the dots, which is often where the intervention stops. And I think it's very important to continue not only developing these organizations, building those connections and allowing for platforms where those connections can be made.
Thank you very much. I see like already a number of key messages emerging from the interventions today. To make innovation and digitalization work for the most vulnerable, and in which case vulnerable youth, women, the informal actors, that you need integrated strategy. You need ecosystem approaches. But I would like to maybe invite our colleague Inosan to reflect further on the experience in Uganda. You mentioned that there was a lot of potential, that a lot has been achieved. Where do you see, you mentioned also that there is a need to move the solution at scale. So what are the key areas you see are most critical to be able to sustain what has been achieved in Uganda in terms of promoting this e-commerce? What kind of actors need to be engaged from government to, and what are the other actors who needs to engage in the ecosystem that, as mentioned by Erica, is needed to bring this solution at scale and make it sustainable over time? Because I remember I read about there was a strong appetite for digital solutions during COVID, right? And many companies resorted to digital solutions, but there were a couple of studies looking at the history and the dynamic of the use of digital solutions. It was going up and it was going down, suggesting that sustainability might be an issue. So over to you, Newsom, to share your perspective. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. Now, when we saw COVID, there was a leap and very fast numbers went up, but then they sort of stabilized when the system is not ready for what the digital transition actually means. So obviously the issues of infrastructure are very, very important. Simple things like addressing in the city, so that when the deliverers on the bikes, the motorbikes, bring these goods, they can easily find you. The other challenge that we have obviously had is the skills question. We need to have a structured way to doing mass digital literacy programs, because you're talking about really millions of people who need to quickly know what advantages are in the digital economy and how do they take advantage of them. You know, and then the other, of course, was tech may be advancing very fast, but we also know that maybe the less fashionable technology is also a solution. So we've been thinking about how we might use feature phones with you know, the poorer consumers to be able to connect with e-commerce without necessarily having to wait to afford, you know, a smartphone. So there's the technology side of things. Of course, we must also look at the cost of internet, and this is really a question of the whole regulatory regime around the pricing of internet and the infrastructure, you know, that supports it. We also learned that energy becomes an interesting factor. You know, how you charge the phone in a remote market, and how other solutions, maybe solar, become useful in that respect. So we've looked at a whole host of things. Of course, we understood that the policy should also send the right signals so that we can get more of the banks, for instance, coming on board to provide a diversified range of payment, you know, payment options. And through this particular experiment we ran, we are able to get Absa Bank and Jumia to connect at their level to see if they can sort of broaden the range of options for facilitating payments. Of course, we took advantage of existing, you know, payment platforms. You've heard of mobile money. It's very active now. There's even mobile lending through those platforms. But how can you make those platforms more accessible, more affordable for, you know, the bottom of the pyramid? These are the conversations that we've looked at. Obviously, there are also challenges as you go e-commerce. Standardization becomes very important. So if you're selling me potatoes or eggplants in a bucket, you know, how do we get consistency? You know, we are talking of wet markets that are super informal, but we want to get them on board. Issues of barcoding for traceability. So all that is what we are trying to address through an ongoing feasibility study or on what it takes to actually build this e-commerce industry, and then put in place the policy and perhaps laws to incentivize that whole process. We've also understood that the knowledge gap is going to be easy to fix if we can create some kind of open source platform for learning. So we are building a self-paced learning platform for SMEs where you can find information about certification, compliance, and where the tech is going and how you might take advantage of that. So we're building that platform, bringing all providers of knowledge together to make it accessible to these, you know, SMEs through a digital platform. Then lastly, we are trying to foster the B2B so that these SMEs can get to know each other and catalyze trade between them. So how do I get a certain amount of metal to say cartoon? I may not be able to do so alone, but maybe there are 20 others producing with whom we can connect and aggregate. So these are all the issues that we've been trying to address, but we're trying to see if we can have some kind of systemic approach, and we are driving this largely through partnerships. It's the partnerships that will make this big difference.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ilse. We are moving there. I mean, again, bringing those innovations at scale, because obviously, no doubt, they can make a big difference in the lives of people, need a whole of society approach and should be firmly anchored into partnerships. Obviously, we started with this partnership between the bank, of course, in this context, which is critical, but clearly this has to go beyond, you know, and even community-based partnerships as well, because we want to reach out to the furthest behind that, but it's needed. Rebecca, over to you. I think this is very insightful, and we are keen on hearing more from your side, and also from a gender perspective, because in this case, your initiative was looking at the specific needs of women entrepreneurs. You mentioned about work-life balance. Let me challenge you on this, that the woman try to make this panel gender balance. So we're going to face this, but over to you, Rebecca. Thank you.
I say life-work balance, not work-life balance. So, you know, you added a very good dimension here. You know, I would say scaling up. When we say scaling up, you know, I have my own definition of scaling up, which many of you may not agree. So my definition of scaling up, and which I have not been able to convince my colleagues also in the executive secretariat of EIF, is that you have to look at scaling up from the perspective of deepening as well as broadening. What do we mean by that? You know, so deepening, when we talk about deepening, this was a need that was felt by women entrepreneurs when we organized the culmination meeting of this project in New Delhi on the 16th of December last year. They say that now we have the skill, now we have the technology, and then, you know, amongst LDCs, you know, globally, South Asian LDCs and East Asian LDCs tend to have better accessibility, affordability of internet services, so which is much better than other elsewhere. So we have the information technology access and everything, but do we have the right kind of policy? Do we have the business development service that is required for us to take advantage of opportunity? Do we have access to finance? You know, these are the key challenges that you face in analog economy. Will continue to haunt these women entrepreneurs. And then these are the areas where you need to provide support. And that's where scaling up in the sense of deepening is important. But broadening is easier, relatively easier. You provide training to women entrepreneurs from other countries in the region. For example, we started with the premise that our support cannot go to any other countries than India, right? So UNSCAP, our partner, said that they would take care of other countries in the region. So there are 8 countries in the region if you look at the geography of the region. So we have Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Nepal as LDCs, but we also have India, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and Pakistan, which are developing countries, right? So then what UNSCAP did was that they mobilized their own resources as well as partnered with Commonwealth Secretariat to bring on board women entrepreneurs from non-LDC countries. So that's already kind of, you know, broadening the engagement with other countries, and that resulted in B2B opportunities and other opportunities and learning from each other. So what we did, we agreed, was that EIF will take care of the initial sunk cost. We'll take care of the sunk cost, including preparation of the manual, the training, you know, hiring of the consultant for training and everything. But, you know, UNSCAP and Commonwealth Secretariat will take care of other costs, and they were able to then bring in others as well. Then they were also able to, when it was digital, they were also able to rope in women entrepreneurs from Turkey and Iran. So that's another example of broadening, right? The The other example of broadening is that to provide training and capacity building support to more women entrepreneurs from these very countries. So that's another example of broadening, where we would probably need additional support in the future going forward, probably impact investment and other kinds of development finance opportunity, or even governments of these countries, if they realize the potential benefit that the program of this nature offers to women entrepreneurs in their respective countries, government will probably be able to put in additional resources. And that's how we would be in a position to both broaden and deepen the scaling up aspect. And then one important point that you made here, in terms of B2B, and then I fully agree with you, is the aggregation, which we haven't looked at. Okay? And particularly women entrepreneurs from a small country like Bhutan, they say that, they produce a lot of quinoa, but then they want to export to a market, let's say in Germany, then, sending 100 kilo would not, solve the problem. They need to send 1,000 kilos or even more than that. And that's when the aggregation, technology or aggregation mechanism would be extremely useful. And, Biplav was telling me when he was in Myanmar that he was, in the process, I don't know where it reached, in the process of, creating an aggregator app whereby, farmers can pool their resources to be able to trade globally. We'll probably discuss that later. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think it was a very, very interesting kickoff discussion on the challenges, the opportunities, but also the challenges for scaling up innovations, including digital innovations. And I think it's a natural pathway to the next session, where we will be discussing exactly this. How can we move even further in terms of leveraging innovations, digital solutions, specifically for specific issues like trading? How do we move from these solutions to the establishment of inclusive digital ecosystems that can be responsive to the need of the most vulnerable in terms of access to services, social services, product and services, finance, and so forth. And that's so thank you very much. I'm going to now kindly invite our other panelists to join this podium. Thank you so much again for this very lively conversation.
Yes.
I like your idea.
Thank you. We would like to thanks for joining the podium. I would also like to invite Mr. Charles Cajalo-Weka to join also this podium. Actually, our first speaker is not with us physically today, but we are moving about to think about how specific innovations and digital solutions can help tackle challenges, and we saw this in the previous session. Now the idea is to look at the pathways towards bringing those solutions at scale. And on this, we are privileged to know that actually a number of LDCs have been pioneering the development of inclusive digital ecosystem, or at least have made big strides in their digital transformation journey. And Bangladesh is one of these countries, obviously. And today we will have a video recording from Mr. Zumaid Ahmed Palak, with the State Minister, ICT Division of the Government of Bangladesh. And Mr. Zunaid Palak is being challenged on 2 questions in this video. First, we're going to hear how Bangladesh and the Bangladesh government has been doing to build the basics for an inclusive digital transformation framework in Bangladesh. And what were the key components of this framework, but also, because that's what we were just talking about, how can we transfer knowledge in this area? That's what we just heard actually from, how do we, engage in these peer learning processes that are most needed when we are venturing in so complex, such a complexity in fact. Let me hand over now to Mr. Zunaid for his intervention.
Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the father of the nation, dreamt of a Sonar Bangla or Golden Bangladesh, where the common citizens of the country live in prosperity and have equitable access to quality education, healthcare, rule of law, and employment opportunities. Under the bold visionary leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, the Awami League-led alliance reiterated that dream in its election manifesto Charter of Change in 2008. With the proclamation of Digital Bangladesh Vision 2021 and now Vision 2041 of Smart Bangladesh to drive the country's sustainable development agenda by striking the right balance between equitable human development and national economic progress. It is a bold vision of an inclusive Bangladesh that greatly resonates with the aspirations of people, particularly the youth. Digital Bangladesh focused on taking services to citizens' doorsteps and implemented the direct implementation guidance of its architect, Shajib was a joy, Honorable ICT Advisor to Honorable Prime Minister. We continue to champion the cause of digital transformation that is inclusive, that leaves no one behind. By developing the Bangladesh Stack, a whole of government and whole of society digital public infrastructure DPI based on 5 interconnected layers. 1. Digital access layer, universal coverage 4G, 5G, Wi-Fi, device accessibility, availability and affordability, interoperability across networks and technology. Second, identity layer, a unique digital identity for every citizen and resident of the country instead of a plethora of digital and analog identities. 3. Payments layer, interoperable seamless payments across different types of banking and non-banking financial institutions, citizens and businesses. Data layer, incentives for public-private partnership based data ecosystems, enabling private sector players to accelerate the continuous development of standardized, high-quality service applications. 5. Services layer, interoperable services across multiple departments that are able to talk to one another, resulting in citizen-centric, unified delivery of essential public service at key moments of life. Combined, the 5 layers outlined above from Bangladesh's inclusive digital transformation stack, which has saved Bangladeshi citizens nearly $22 billion, Even a poor elderly widow living in a remote village can now simply walk a short distance to the local government office in her village, which hosts a digital center, a one-stop shop, one of 9,000 plus dotted across the countryside for all government services. Similarly, Bangladesh Stack can also serve as a frugal, citizen-centric technology blueprint for least developed and developing countries, particularly to poor and marginalized communities. As our country is poised to graduate from LDC status, Bangladesh has simultaneously moved on from being a net importer of knowledge to a net exporter, especially in the era of inclusive digital transformation. We have begun supporting the digital progress of many developing countries. The ingredients of success for Digital Bangladesh can be replicated quickly and easily in other LDCs. I can also share the examples of National Intelligence for Skills, Education, Employment and Entrepreneurship, in short, NICE, and e-commerce platform ActShop. NICE is a collective intelligence platform to mobilize data, tacit knowledge, business insights, and evidence to bridge the existing gap among skills service providers, youth, and employers in Bangladesh, Jordan, and Somalia. And ActShop is an assisted and integrated e-commerce platform of Bangladesh, enabling e-commerce facility to business in Bangladesh, Turkey, Yemen, and South Sudan to earn a livelihood online by training to become freelancers and registering on crowdsourcing marketplace websites, among others. The Philippines is replacing MyGov platform of Bangladesh, customizing to the context of its Bangsamoro autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao Barm to bring all the digital services of the government under one umbrella. Additionally, through the Bangladesh government's soon to be launched International ICT Innovation I3 facility to funding support to experiment with ideas and prototype solutions to large-scale development challenges. I would like to thank Mr. Robert Opp and his wonderful team at the Chief Digital Office, CDO, for seamless support to share the journey and experience towards inclusive digital transformation of Bangladesh with global southern countries and communities. To narrow down digital divides across the borders, serving the greater goal of leaving no one behind. Mr. Anil Chaudhary, policy advisor of our flagship project A2I program, is also here with us for any follow-up questions and discussions. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Very enlightening presentation of what Bangladesh and LDC on its road to graduation has been able to achieve in terms of putting in place the building block of an inclusive ecosystems that can, and that would be my takeaway, that now allows a woman in a remote area of Bangladesh to access a wide range of services in a very short time. So it's a fight against time poverty also for women. And that would be also one of my takeaway. But let me now turn to Robert Hope. And actually there was a natural connection between the intervention of the minister and Robert Hope. And that's what partnership actually is about. To tell us more about UNDP's vision and the Chief Digital Office vision, also about what are the key pathways towards inclusive digital transformation. And this takes us back to a very important point that was made by both Mr. Halion Xu, but also Mr. Khalifa Al-Kuvari, that whatever we do in this field needs to be human-centered. So over to you, Robert, to tell us more about our approach.
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much, Natalie. Sorry. It's great to be here. Well, I mean, I would talk, I guess, a little bit about the kinds of things that we're seeing in terms of trends and kind of connecting that with the last panel as well, in terms of digital transformation and using digital as a kind of accelerator for sustainable development. And the first thing is that this space around, we talked a lot in the first panel about solutions that come up as a result of digital and innovation. But what we saw, particularly since the COVID pandemic, is that there's really a realization that these things need to be connected, that those silos need to be broken, that e-commerce cannot be effective in little sort of pockets. It needs to have some sort of layers. Minister Palak was very gracious in mentioning our work, but in fact, Bangladesh was way ahead of the curve, and Iran and his work at the Bangladesh level, they were leading the way, along with leaders like India, Estonia, and others that have really come to this realization that digital work happens really in ecosystems. So you can have these great solutions, but they're going to be limited unless you start to really build out that full ecosystem. And to that effect, we talk also about digital public infrastructure, which Minister Palak mentioned as well, having the layers necessary across a whole of society approach to make that work. The second, I think, realization in a way is that also was accelerated by COVID, is that digital is not inherently neutral. It all depends on how you approach it and how you implement it. So you need to take great caution in ensuring that you're leaving no one behind. That is an intentional process. You must be intentionally inclusive, because if you're not, it can actually aggravate inequality. And as we know, digital technologies can bring different kinds of risks and challenges around it, whether it's misinformation or risks around data privacy and so on, or cybersecurity, that need to be addressed really intentionally. And then the third area is kind of on this theme of the kind of broader ecosystem. We know that particularly in LDCs, capacity is a huge issue. So digital skills, digital capacity, also the strength of local digital ecosystems. And these are things that can really impact negatively your overall move to digital transformation if you don't address them. And again, this is where countries like Bangladesh and India and others really had to invest in a large way to make sure that you're able to really bring the ecosystem along, so that you're not just at the mercy, in a sense, of international tech giants, or you're not having a lopsided kind of digital development. You really have to make sure you're looking at that overall and holistic piece in a strategic way, so that your ecosystem and all of its kind of different features, whether it's the sort of digital layers, the business ecosystem, the regulatory environment, or your policy environment, are all really brought into harmony, because otherwise you can't achieve the full potential there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rob. I might have another follow-up question, of course, on this, but again, I mean, the conference as a whole, looking at the agenda for this LDC 5 conference, has been a strong emphasis, and it has a big footprint thematically on innovation, technology. But I do think that what makes the difference with this session is this effort made to look at people first, to put people first in discussing opportunities and challenges. And that's perhaps what makes things very, very appealing, at least from my perspective in this session. And for this, I'm privileged today to have also with us Mr. Charles Cajolo-Vecca. I hope I pronounced your name well.
You got it.
Actually, Charles is a human rights activist, founder and executive director of Youth Society and a global youth ambassador on SDG 16. So I do sense that your perspective can even shed further light on what we are talking about. So I will kindly invite you to share a couple of perspectives on how do you think, and especially from a youth perspective, how do you think that innovation, technology, and solutions or digital ecosystems can make a real difference for young people and maybe other vulnerable groups, and can empower them truly and genuinely?
Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction and for the intervention that that has set the tone for this discussion. Yeah, so I work for Youth and Society, which is a governance and human rights watch group based in Malawi. As you are aware, Malawi is one of the least developed countries. And I am here to share some of the strides that we have made, and also invite some of you to work with us in transforming our economy through the intervention that we are championing, including technology. Maybe to paint a little bit of a picture, we are talking about a population of about 18 to 19 million people, and only 14% of that population has access to internet. So you're looking at 86% of the population that has no access to internet. And that is the violent exclusion and marginalization that we're grappling with, and that must concern all of us. What it means is that 86% of the population has no access to what you and me have to. And this is the biggest population. And that is the potential that we are losing, that we need to turn into prosperity. Number two, we look at again the exclusion of historically marginalized groups, including women, persons with disabilities, those living in poverty. The challenge is even much more bigger within the difficult context that the larger population is already suffering. But I'm here also to share the hope that we are making strides as a country. Number one is that as a country, we have embarked on a long-term vision of our country to transform our country into a more self-reliant, wealthy, and more inclusive society. And we have put in place what we are calling Malawi 2063, that is trying to put Malawi on the path of self-reliance, wealth creation. But again, that wealth creation and that self-reliance must be more inclusive to ensure that we graduate our people from the current shackles of poverty into prosperity. To achieve this, we realize that the technology is quite central. And just to share with you, according to the World Bank report, the Malawi Economic Monitoring Report of 2019, it's very clear that Malawi is losing around $189 million in addition to GDP, and the 33 million in tax revenue per year because of its poor ICT infrastructure. If you add these two figures, you'll be talking about over $240 million that we are losing as a country because we're not invested, in technology, or because there's limited capacity. These are the resources that could be invested in healthcare, education, jobs for youth. So when we're looking at technology in our context, we're looking at technology as a springboard that we can use, to achieve our economic aspirations as a country. Let me also highlight that we have come up with what is called the digital economy strategy. And I would want to invite all of you to join us in the implementation of this strategy through partnership, through strategic partnerships. We have set an ambitious vision that in the next 5 years, we need to get Malawi to higher heights. For example, as I was talking about 14% internet penetration, the strategy is envisioning to raise this penetration to around 80% by 2026. That's quite ambitious. But again, we need to, we need to get the ground working, and we need to build strategic partnerships. And the stakeholders who can support Malawi to achieve that aspiration are here, and some are the ones that our government and all of us are talking to. Number two, apart from the digital economy strategy that we have developed and that we are implementing, we're also ensuring that we take interventions to safeguard freedoms online, particularly where you have challenges with access. At the same time, you have tendencies, and there are efforts that are being taken to that end. There is a call on the review of the laws to ensure that we guarantee freedom of expression online, because that is very key in ensuring participation of the citizens in the socio-economic development. When you're talking about the economy, when the technology, you're talking about the jobs online. We are talking about building democracies. And if we do not safeguard freedoms online, then even the economic gains that we are making are not going to be sustainable. So we must build the economies, but again, we must build better democracies so that we strike that balance in terms of sustainable development. And maybe in the last minute, let me also just highlight that through the regulator, MACRA, that's Malawi Regulatory Authority, there are interventions that are being implemented at the moment, including what we're calling MUNI. So MUNI, it's a local term that basically depicts light, right? Like giving hope. And through this intervention, the government of Malawi has put in place about $300,000. This is like much more of a matching grant that is open to be accessed by different actors, be it young people in the rural communities, be it innovators, those that in the creative industry. So government has put this money as seed money and come up with the innovations, can tap from this money. Our target as a country is to have at least $1 million US. So to increase this from 300,000, you can see the deficit of $700,000 US that we need through partnerships, and that's an opportunity that we would like to explore with the different partners, even in this room. So this has to highlight some of the strides that government is undertaking. But let me also quickly highlight the challenges that are there. So one of our challenges is the access to energy. So again, you only have about maybe 12% of the country that has access to electricity. As I'm speaking now, this evening, at least 88% of the population will be in darkness. And already that again has affected, issues of accessibility and also affordability, because even companies have to rely much more on alternative energies, and that again, increases the cost of production, and all that cost again, is heaped on consumers. Apart from that, we also have limited, access to technologies. So affordability in terms of mobile facilities, in terms of internet, And that again has a negatively affected digital literacy. So illiteracy levels again are very, very high, and we need to seriously address that and invest in the people by making sure that they have access to this, but by addressing these structural challenges that we are facing. Lastly, I would want to highlight that if we are to achieve inclusive, sustainable development, we must much more focus on the historically marginalized groups. These are the people who are living in poverty. These are women, and these are people who are living in the rural areas where access to most of the services is almost unfathomable. And we think that investment in these historically marginalized groups is going to increase the benefits for sustainable development goals, but as well as fast tracking the attainment of the development aspirations that were put in place as a country. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this very rich and multifaceted intervention. I will not necessarily reflect on everything, but the point on making sure that the enabling infrastructure is in place, and we are talking about energy, is something essential. And I think Erika this morning mentioned about that. How can we talk digitalization even we cannot charge our mobiles? We have our spare batteries or whatever. But what is the situation in remote areas or even, slums for that? So, but there is always a bit of hope. And I see it through our work at UNDP, like you can connect digital transformation and green transformation. And what we do, for instance, for our African mini grid program, where we are using solar panel to provide energy that could be used for mobile phones, for maybe it's just a way to think. Let's think digital and green together. And I think that's something that has a lot of potential, obviously. You mentioned also, and perhaps that will be the point for me to go back to Rob when I left. Something very interesting, because I pushed you, I challenged you with a question about human rights when it comes to those digital transformation. And you mentioned about something very important: let people speak online. I would say, okay, we can unpack this, and it might take us much beyond the purpose of this meeting, but it's an important point, because one question I would like to ask you, Rob, how do we make sure practically that the needs, the perspectives of people, and especially from the most marginalized population, are fully taken on board when we are moving towards the development of digital ecosystems, digital infrastructure, and digital strategy, because all it needs to be backed up by strategy, obviously. Over to you, and
Yeah, thank you. And first, I'd like to thank Charles for reminding us of the reality of many LDCs. So you spoke about, connectivity is only 14% in Malawi. Across all LDCs, that's 36% as an average. And of course, the gender digital divide is worse. So across all LDCs, only 30% of women, compared with, I think, 43% of men are connected. So you have to really look at this issue as one of, marginalization, inclusion, and justice as well. So one of the things that we have tried to do in UNDP's approach to this is that we have a digital strategy that is about supporting countries in their digital journeys, but taking a rights-based approach and an inclusive and gender-sensitive approach. And what that means, to your question, Natalie, is really that from the beginning of the planning of your digital transformation, your digital strategy, we are needing to, we put the marginalized populations as kind of part of that notion of being people-centered. We have to have the policies, we have to have the understanding of the strategies for inclusion in place as you're planning your digital transformation. Some people have said to us, why are you doing digital transformation in countries like Malawi or like Mauritania and others where we've worked when people don't have electricity and they don't have connectivity? but it's not an either or, it is a must do both. And so you have to plan for your extension of electricity, connectivity, and your digital layers, as Minister Palak was talking about. That has to be done at the same time. And practically speaking, that means convening a dialogue among government, among economic players like business community, civil society, and others, to really talk about where we are now in terms of digital readiness and where we need to be in terms of our ambitions around this. And that is really the fundamental part of a part of the participation picture, which is that we want to have all sectors really participating in that. The other thing is that when you build these channels and you do get people connected, you build in systems of citizen feedback. And so it's crucial that people have an ability to voice their concerns, voice their feedback. And we see many different examples of this, whether it's kind of feedback to government on what's happening in the digital work or public works or many other kinds of feedback platforms. Those are really important. And, we also take, we do have to look at this as a kind of a rights-based endeavor as well. I actually did a presentation last week called, Will Connectivity Ever Be a Human Right? And the point is that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the economic and social covenants related to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights protect and affirm the right to people's development. And whether connectivity itself is a human right or not, we have to see this as a fundamental part of the right to development. And so we take a rights-based approach. That's certainly what we advocate for when we work with our partners. The last thing I would say, Natalie, is, it's so important when we look at what are the key success factors of this, having the political will and leadership to run that whole of society approach is absolutely critical. You see that in Bangladesh, you see that in India, you see that in other places that have done this successfully. And the ability to take that whole of society approach that includes those voices so that no one is left behind.
Thank you, Rob. I think you did my job in terms of concluding this session, but no, I think we started a bit late. So I just want to check if among the colleagues and participants in the audience, there are some questions that you would like to ask to some of our panelists. Yes, there is a question. Yeah, if you can just stand up, introduce yourself, and thank you.
Hello, my name is Laura Munoz. I come from the UNCDF, United Nations Capital Development Fund. We're also very interested in the topic of the digital transformation. This is probably more a comment, but it can also become a question to see what you think. The digital transformation journey can be quite overwhelming as a journey because, as you have mentioned, there's many layers to it, many aspects relating regulation, relating to infrastructure, to the local ecosystem. And for many governments, it may be difficult to decide where to start or what is more important. And it resonates with the panelists were saying around, I've got this need on electricity, but also on the digital layers. And for that reason, at UNCDF, we have developed a tool. It's called IDEs, Inclusive Digital Economies, a scorecard that support governments to understand where they are, as sort of like a diagnostic that includes all the aspects and help them make that scoring and to make then the prioritization and make decisions through it. So if there's any government also that may want to know more about it, we would be more than happy. There are around 25 governments currently using it. Malawi is one of our wonderful partners in this journey. The question is, how is it possible to understand all the complexities about digital transformation, and how can governments evaluate the different needs, competing interests, and be able to make those decisions for very practical terms, including budgeting? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Any other question from the floor? Yes.
Thank you very much. I was just wondering, for the seed fund that exists for Malawi, you said that there's a current pool of 300,000 and you're trying to raise the additional 700,000. So what sectors is this targeted toward? Is there any particular sector or industry that it's targeted toward? Thank you.
You can take maybe one more question and then we'll ask our panelists to answer. Everybody must be starting at this point. So let me now turn to Rob, maybe if you want to reflect on the comments from our colleagues from UNC. Thank you.
Sure. Couldn't agree more that it's very tricky for countries to determine priorities. And so the IDES tool is very powerful for the digital economy space. We often see that in a complementary way to one of the platforms we've created, which is called the Digital Readiness Assessment, that is meant to sort of take all sectors of society, including government, kind of decision makers and leadership around that, and really have an exchange of information, knowledge, and perceptions on how different parts of society are ready or not for the digital transformation. So those kinds of diagnostic platforms, those kinds of tools, and that kind of whole of society process that is participatory at its heart is extremely important. So I think I would leave it there.
Thank you. Let me now turn to take the shots for a few clarifications about the seed funding.
Well, thank you so much for the question. So in terms of the seed funding, so you're right that we want to raise it from 200,000 to mining, so any area that is relevant to the economy. But maybe also just to highlight that our Malawi 2063 is focusing much more on 3 core areas. Number one is the agricultural productivity . And the last one is industrialization. And when you look at these 3 fundamental areas, they will heavily rely on technology for us to harvest the hanging fruits and the long term benefits of this investment in these 3 sectors.
Sure. I think I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we were a little bit urged to close the session, so I will not. My remarks will not be long. I mean, it was a very interesting journey. We started thinking about solutions that can work for people and especially for the most vulnerable, and there is a lot of potential. And those solutions have already really benefited the marginalized. But as long as you go to the next step, that's when the complexity is entering into the picture. How can you move towards something more sustainable? And obviously, I think this issue of how do we deal with complexity? Of course, from UNDP perspective, we say, well, on complexity, you cannot have single point solutions. When it comes to digitalization, it's not about providing digital skills literacy only. It's about energy, electricity, the right regulatory frameworks, the hardware, and so forth. So you need to have this integrated approach that requires analysis, sequencing, and just to reflect on what our colleagues from UNCDF were saying, how do you sequence that? Because all these things, it can be very costly, even in terms of investments. So that's one point. So how do we move on that? And I think we are all on a learning curve, even if we have already example of successful initiatives. And of course, everything has to be contextualized also to the history of the country. And last but not least, what we need in the first place and throughout this journey is to never forget people's needs, perceptions, and even solutions. Thank you so much for attending this very, very, very interesting session. Thank you so much. Let me applaud.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah.